Hey everyone, thank you for joining in on Thoughtful Thursday. I'm Pastor Susan Young and just wanted to come and bring you some thoughts. As we mourn the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, our Supreme Court Justice, and we watch the news on what feminism really is and isn't, I kind of want to bring you some thoughts. I was reading an article recently that I wanted to bring to you. And I wanted to just kind of talk to you a little bit about what feminism started out as being and what it is today. And so back in my grandmother's day, feminism meant having the right to vote. Only about 4 states had the right to vote at that time. I think it was Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, and I believe Colorado. There was only 4 states in the United States that were allowed to vote in the early 1900s, and we did not get the ratification for women to vote until 1920. In my mother's time, it was getting equal pay for equal work. She was in banking and she was an operations manager, but there weren't managers of banks at that time. Interestingly enough, while she worked in an industry that determined whether you had the credit to buy a house or get a credit card, it wasn't until 1974 that a woman could get a credit card without having her husband or her father co-sign for her. So while she worked in an industry where she was determining the lives of other people, she could not yet run her own life successfully through her own thought process, but it had to be run through her husband or her father. You see, feminism is not about whether we can be obscene or lewd or crude. That was always the case. You can go back in time hundreds and thousands of years before, and we have been allowed to be madams. We have been allowed to be concubines. We have been allowed to be prostitutes. We have been allowed to be lewd and crude and obscene in many ways. But the right to sit at the table and to make a decision for our own lives is very recent. And I think the fight of feminism is not what you think it is. It's not about whether we can twerk the greatest or whether we can be lewd or whether we can be dressed scantily or whatever. And no, I'm not talking about standards. I don't believe that women can't cut their hair or wear makeup or a dress. That is not the issue. The issue is, what exactly are we fighting for? See, we're women. We were created equal, but we're different. So let's talk about some of the things that have happened over the years to women and what exactly feminism and fighting for feminism really is. In an article by Women's Day, it said that in the 19th century, there was an unusual panic. Scientists believed that women's bodies weren't fit to travel at 50 miles an hour. So because of the railroad train, they weren't allowed to ride on the railroad train because scientists thought that our uteruses would fly out of our bodies as the train accelerated to that speed. You see, sometimes it takes science a long time to catch up to what exactly is real. We could talk about what that means today, but we'll refrain as we're talking about feminism. The U.S. military has a long history of restricting women's rights within their ranks. Anne Dunwoody, the first female 4-star general in the U.S. military, recalls that in the 1980s, the Army was banning barrettes and bobby pins women used to keep their hair in place under jump school helmets, claiming that they were hazardous while parachuting. In 1948, even as women were allowed to serve as permanent members of the military, they were expressly prohibited from combat positions. In 2013, the Joint Chiefs of Staff lifted the combat ban and service branches were given 3 years to implement the change. If members of our military can meet the qualifications for a job, said Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, they should have the right to serve. Smoking in public was banned until about 1908. Smoking in public. It will be against the law for a hotel or restaurant proprietor or anyone else managing or owning a public place to allow women to smoke in public. Though the ordinance was rushed through, a few people present at the board hearing for the new rule voiced dissent. Attendee John Henry Smith commented that it would be much better for the board to concern itself with hardships of the poor than with such nonsensical things as smoking by a few women in a restaurant. We didn't get to run in marathons until 1970. For years, the Amateur Athletic Union, which served as the governing body of the U.S. track and field, including most road races, had banned women from competing in marathons. The organization, founded to promote physical fitness, disseminated bogus scientific research that claimed long-distance running could cause infertility in women. And by the 1970s, the AAU finally relented, allowing that certain women could participate in marathons. You see, we're equal, but we're different. Getting a credit card. In the 20th century, credit card companies routinely denied single women access to their own lines of credit. The cards were reserved for men and married women who could have their husband co-sign on their applications. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974 changed that, making it unlawful for any creditor to discriminate against any applicant on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, or marital status. It wasn't until the 1970s that we got control of how we use the money that we were currently making in the marketplace. Serving on a jury. For nearly 20 years, from 1879 to 1898, women were entirely banned from carrying out their civic duties in courts all over the country. Shortly before the turn of the 20th century, Utah relented, but by 1927, less than half the states allowed them to serve. Among the reasons for excluding women, they weren't fit to hear details of criminal cases, particularly those involving sex offenses. They would be too sympathetic to accused criminals. They should instead focus on their primary obligations of a wife and a mother, and it would be improper for men and women to serve on juries together for long periods of time. Finally, in 1975, only 41 years ago, the Supreme Court struck down the ban. Actually, it's been about 45 years now, but 45 years ago, we got to sit on a jury. Becoming an astronaut. There wasn't an official ban on female astronauts, but NASA's recruiting methods effectively blocked women of any chance of even interviewing for the job. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, managers at NASA decided to accept applications from only one pool of people, military test pilots. And because the U.S. military didn't accept women into pilot training, there were none in the group that NASA interviewed. It took until 1979 before NASA hired female applicants to train as astronauts. In 1983, Sally Ride became the first female astronaut to enter space. So you see, we've been allowed as women to act crudely, to be obscene, to use our bodies for sex or money or whatever it was. Even in the Bible, Rahab was a madam. Even in the Bible, Abraham tried to sell Sarah to make sure that his safety was secure. Even in the Bible, David took Bathsheba, the wife of another man, and used her as his own. We have plenty of precedents for women being used and objectified sexually. But is that what we want for today? Is that what we're really fighting for? Is that what feminism means? Because if it does, then it negates the women's movement of the 1900s, where they were just looking for a right to have a voice, a right to sit on a jury, a right to have a credit card, a right to vote, a right to have their own means of employment and their own means of money at the time. It's interesting right now that we are arguing over Cardi B. Now, I don't know her. I don't judge her. I don't know her walk. I don't even know the song that they're talking about right now. I just refuse to put myself in the place where I have to listen to something like that. But it's interesting to me that when I looked up the writer of the song and the manager of her management company, they're men. They're men exploiting a woman. And maybe she doesn't feel exploited because the money's coming in and because, she's beautiful right now, but everything has a shelf life. And if you look at Hollywood, women are put away by the time they're 40, and it doesn't make it right. I just wonder what exactly it is that we're doing in this time and why we're fighting one another. Women, we need to stand together in this time and really stand for what true feminism means. And what that means is that we carry ourselves differently than men. We react differently than men. We move around differently than men. And yet we are still equal because we are equal in the sight of God. This movie Cuties, or this show Cuties on Netflix, honestly, I only saw the previews. It looks pretty raunchy, but I did see Dance Moms. I watched 2 episodes, and to be honest, I got into 8 minutes of season 1, episode 2, where the dance instructor, Abby Lynn, I believe her name is, tells these little girls, I want you to look hot and sexy. I want you to stick out your butt like a 17-year-old. I don't know where that has any place in feminism at all. I don't see where that is challenging to us in any way, or where we are getting this idea that that is something that to strive for. As women, we don't need to lower ourselves to those types of standards. We don't need to dress that way. Our feminism is not in the clothing that we wear, but how we are carrying ourselves and what we are doing. And so, ladies, I implore you to be mighty women of God, to hold your head up high, to look for places where you can serve. You can be a manager, you can be a president of a company, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be a pastor, you can be anything you want to be. But bring your female trait to it. You don't have to be a man in order to succeed. You can be a woman and still carry your femininity, still carry your modesty, still carry your self-esteem and your worth with you. You are so worthy. God created you equal. He created you special. He created you more than. And so I just urge you, walk in that. Learn what women's movement meant. Learn what we were trying to fight for. And learn what exactly we can learn from all of this that is going on in our world. There are people that would want to objectify us. There are people who would want to sexualize us. That's nothing new. That's nothing special. But a woman in a boardroom, a woman with a seat at the table, who can lend a voice to this crazy, crazy time that we're living in, that's what you want to strive for. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next week.